Take a look at this photo. It shows two Red Army soldiers who were surrounded by German soldiers. It is not clear what they are talking about and what will happen next. Today we will look into this issue. The photographs came to Russia in the 90s. The Norwegians handed over historical books about the war in the Arctic to the residents of Murmansk. According to them, the photographs were obtained from a German veteran who himself witnessed these events on the Kola Peninsula at the end of June 1941. A military clash in the mountains at an altitude of 122 in June 1941 is one of the favorite military stories of local historians. The goal of the Wehrmacht on the northern front was to capture the ice-free port of Murmansk and the strategic Murmansk-Leningrad Railway. Due to fierce Russian resistance, the war in the north took on a protracted character and continued until the surrender of Finland in 1944. The height 122 was in the way of the German troops' offensive on Murmansk. From afar, the Germans saw movement on the ridge and sent a reconnaissance group to clarify the situation. When the scouts reached the mountain ridge, there were explosions of hand grenades and machine gun volleys. Realizing that the reconnaissance group was ambushed, the Germans immediately attacked the height. A heavy hand-to-hand battle ensued with the defenders of Murmansk, among whom, presumably, was the soldier Sergei Korolkov. At night, mountain riflemen stormed the height. The resistance of the Red Army was fierce. In that battle, a company of Rangers, under the command of Lieutenant Rode, lost a lot of people. At 6 in the morning, the Germans broke the resistance and took the height. Here is the beginning of the tragic plot with the shooting of Russian soldiers. In Hans Ruff's book, Soviet fighters are described as barbarians and cowards who fight not according to military laws. Ruff claims that the Russians ruthlessly destroyed the prisoners, finishing off the survivors. German officers, according to Ruff, were seized with deep indignation. They staged a demonstrative execution of Soviet prisoners, presenting it as an act of revenge. Every step of the execution is carefully recorded in the photo: the capture of Korolkov and his comrade, interrogation, preparation for execution, the bodies of the dead on the stones. Such a story appears in Ruff's book. Judging by the memoirs and photographs, the prisoners knew that there would be no mercy for them, but they held themselves courageously, both in their posture and in their gaze. The Russians understood perfectly well why they would be shot, recalled a veteran of the German Mountain Rifle Corps. After execution, our commander sent all the recordings and film to the headquarters. Until today, no one knew either the place of events or the names of the dead Red Army soldiers. However, the Murmansk search squad found the bodies of Soviet prisoners of war, those whose famous pictures were published in books and albums dedicated to the Second World War. In one of the summers, a group of Russian historians reconstruct the events of 1941 in the Arctic, repeating the route of the 2nd Mountain Division of the Wehrmacht to the Tatarka River. The group, in full uniform of the Great Patriotic War, walked 80 kilometers, and on the last day of the journey found itself at the supposed place of execution of Soviet prisoners of war. We have been studying the plot from German photos for a long time and assumed that it unfolded in our north. We calculated the approximate search area, and within the help of the local history expedition, Tatovsky Route, we tried to establish the place of death of the fighters from the photos, says Dmitry Dulich, a military historian and local historian from Murmansk, who had been searching for the place of execution for several years. On the last day of the expedition, the group came to a clearing surrounded by stones of recognizable shape. The reconciliation of the landscape with photographs left no doubt that it was here that Soviet soldiers were shot 72 years ago. Murmansk search squad Alexander Porochakov and Nikolai Grishchenko came to the aid of local historians. The excavations did not last long. 2 days later, the searchers found the remains of soldiers shot here in the first days of the war in the 41st. The ground was literally touched with fingers. There were also soldiers' medallions, says Dulich. The fact that the execution of the fighters is recorded in the photo and preserved in the archives makes the finding of the Murmansk search squad unique. Indeed, it is very rare that fieldwork is correlated with archival documents. We can assume that a separate military episode, the story of two human destinies, has now been completed, Dmitry Dulich believes. Geographically, the place from the photos is located in the foothills of the Mustatunchari Ridge at an altitude of 122. The same relief of the clearing with small growth, the same arrangement and shape of the stones as in the photo 72 years ago. Time has erased the traces of the tragedy, but the rocky landscape has remained unchanged. After the discovery of the remains of the soldiers, Murmansk search squad deciphered the medallion of one of them and began searching for relatives of Private Sergei Korolkov. In 1946, Korolkov's wife applied to the commissariat of the Dzerzhinsky district, looking for her husband. At that time, she was living with her sister and raising a 6-year-old daughter. In the military enlistment office, Ekaterina Korolkova was told that her husband was missing. From the soldier's medallion and the archives found, it is known that Korolkov was born in 1912, lived on the territory of the present Tver region. In the pre-war 40th year, Kurolkov had a daughter. On June 23, 1941, he volunteered for the front, and a week later, defending Murmansk, he was shot at the 122nd height. 72 years later, the Murmansk search squad found the remains of volunteer Kurolkov, completing his biography. After the publication of information about the found fighter, the closest relatives of the deceased Kurolkov were found: his 73-year-old daughter Nana Krylova and 6 grandchildren who live in the villages of the Andriopolsky district of the Tver region. His photos have not been preserved in the family album. The daughter, who did not know her father, will see him for the first time in the famous photographs taken by the Germans at the time of the execution. It is known that of the 2 fighters in the photo, Kurolkov is the one in the overcoat. Dear friends, that's all for today. It was Tim in the Eastern Front channel. I would be glad to get any comment from you and likes. And as usual, I wish you peace and health. See you.